A flash split the sky at that moment. It wasn't just a bolt of lightning. It was a signal that no one could explain. Have you ever wondered if there are invisible forces at work in the world? Forces that conspire in the shadows, manifesting at crucial moments in human history, leaving marks that defy any rational explanation. Perhaps you have felt it yourself. That inexplicable shiver down your spine. The feeling that something larger is unfolding beyond what your eyes can see. In 2003, on the arid plateaus of Matera, Italy, something extraordinary occurred. The Mediterranean sky, usually clear and serene, suddenly darkened. Clouds gathered as if summoned by an ancient power. The air grew heavy with an energy that made the hairs on your arms stand on end. Can you imagine being there? Feeling the electricity in the air, watching the shadows stretch as the sky shifted moods in a matter of minutes? Jim Caviezel was portraying Jesus Christ. His body, covered in makeup that simulated wounds and blood, remained exposed to rapidly deteriorating weather. The crucifixion scene, perhaps the most powerful portrayal of divine sacrifice, was being filmed under the meticulous direction of Mel Gibson. And then it happened. A lightning bolt sliced through the sky like a flaming sword. A deafening roar. And in an instant, Jim Caviezel, the man playing Christ, was struck. I felt as if my entire body were burning from within, he later recalled. It was as if something was trying to tear me away from the character, or from life itself. But why? Why at that moment? Why that man? Why during that particular shoot? What would you say if you knew that this wasn't an isolated incident on set, that a series of inexplicable events surrounded the production of this very film? Have you ever considered that perhaps, just perhaps, when we touch on certain veils that separate the visible from the invisible, forces manifest in ways that defy our understanding? That bolt wasn't just an electrical discharge. It was a warning, a signal, a manifestation, and you are about to discover why. Before we can understand what really happened on that film set, we need to go back a little in time. You must get to know Jim Caviezel before that fateful moment. James Patrick Caviezel grew up in a devout Catholic family in Mount Vernon, Washington. From a young age, his faith was not merely a family tradition but a deep, personal conviction. Can you imagine a child who, while others dreamed of becoming astronauts or firefighters, harbored in his heart the desire to serve something greater than himself? Caviezel's journey in Hollywood took an unusual path. In an industry often criticized for its materialism and superficiality, he stayed true to his convictions, frequently turning down roles that compromised his values. When he was approached to portray Jesus Christ in Mel Gibson's ambitious project, something inside him resonated in a way he couldn't explain. I felt as though I had been prepared for this role my entire life, he confided to close friends. Have you ever noticed how, when we approach something deeply meaningful, unexpected resistance seems to arise out of nowhere, as if unseen forces are trying to steer us away from our path? On the eve of accepting the role, Caviezel felt an inexplicable fear. It wasn't just the normal apprehension of an actor about to take on a challenging part. It was something deeper, more visceral, as if something whispered in his ear, "Don't do this." And here's something few know. 3 different individuals, with no apparent connection among them, approached Caviezel to warn him about the consequences of playing Jesus. They weren't issuing concrete threats. They were enigmatic, almost prophetic warnings. A stranger approached him in a Los Angeles cafe. "You shouldn't mess with this. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed." Would you believe such warnings? Or would you dismiss them as mere superstition? Caviezel chose to move forward, driven by his faith and the conviction that he was doing something important. But as he delved into the role, he began to experience unsettling phenomena. During the preparatory studies for the role, books inexplicably fell from shelves when he was alone. His phone rang in the middle of the night, but when he answered, there was only silence on the other end. Small incidents that, in isolation, might have been easily dismissed, but together formed a disquieting pattern. "I felt like I was being watched," he later recounted, as if something did not want that film to be made. The filming began, and with it a series of inexplicable events. Equipment that was functioning perfectly suddenly malfunctioned. Unexpected weather disruptions interrupted crucial scenes. Crew members reported similar disturbing dreams. And then, on that fateful day, the sky darkened in a manner that local meteorologists described as highly unusual for the region and season. Can you feel it? That sense that something greater was at stake? That invisible forces were manifesting in tangible ways? The bolt was about to strike, and with it, a revelation that would change Jim Caviezel's life forever. The moment of impact was etched into the memory of everyone on set. A blinding flash, followed by a thunderous roar that seemed to make the very air vibrate. Can you imagine the shock, the panic, the ensuing confusion? It was as if time stood still, recalled a camera assistant who witnessed the event. I saw the bolt hit near Jim, and for a second, I swore he was luminous, as if he were radiating light from within. Caviezel fell. The ensuing silence was deafening. That type of silence that fills the space when something inexplicable occurs, when words fail and reality seems to bend in on itself. The medical team rushed to his aid, fearing the worst. Against all medical odds, Jim was conscious. Disoriented, yes, but miraculously alive, and without the severe burns that typically accompany a lightning strike. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to stand on the threshold between two worlds? Because that was exactly what Jim later described. I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel or anything like that, he explained in a rarely mentioned interview. It was more like an expanded awareness, as if, for a brief moment, I could perceive layers of reality that are normally hidden from us. In the days that followed the incident, inexplicable phenomena began occurring around Caviezel. Objects moved without explanation in his presence. People reported feeling an unusual energy around him. Some crew members even swore that, from certain angles and under particular lighting, they could see an aura around him. But the most unsettling were the dreams. Caviezel began experiencing vivid, recurring nocturnal visions, not nightmares in the conventional sense, but intense experiences that left him exhausted upon waking. I dreamed of dark figures watching the filming from afar, he told a close friend. Entities that seemed furious with what we were doing, as if we were exposing something that should have remained hidden. One particularly enigmatic phenomenon began to occur during subsequent scenes. Whenever Caviezel recited certain biblical passages, especially those related to confrontations with malevolent forces, the electrical equipment failed. Lights flickered, cameras shut down, and microphones picked up inexplicable static. Mel Gibson, known for his own religious fervor, interpreted these events in a very specific way. It's clear we've touched something real here. We aren't just making a movie, we're exposing a battle that continues to unfold, invisible to our eyes. Would you believe that? Or would you seek a more rational explanation? A technician tried to dismiss the phenomena. We're on a remote location, with highly sensitive equipment and unstable weather conditions. Of course, we're going to encounter technical issues. But how do you explain that these technical issues occurred almost exclusively during the most spiritually charged scenes? How do you explain that after the lightning incident, Jim sometimes knew things he had no way of knowing, like the name of a stranger he'd just met, or personal details about crew members that had never been shared? Then came the most unsettling discovery. An old local legend, nearly forgotten by the residents of Matera, spoke of a specific spot on the hills, exactly where the crucifixion scene was being filmed, as a point of spiritual convergence, a place where the veil between worlds was thinnest. The local inhabitants avoided that spot, especially during storms. Can you feel the chills running up your spine? The sensation that there are invisible connections, transcending our rational understanding. The bolt that struck Jim Caviezel wasn't a random meteorological accident. It was a milestone, a turning point. And the true revelations were just beginning. What happens when an ordinary man is touched by the extraordinary? How does he continue living in the everyday world after having experienced something that defies the very structure of reality? After the incident, as filming continued, Jim Caviezel began to change in subtle yet profound ways. Those around him noticed a new quality in his presence, an intensity in his gaze, a depth in his words, as if he were simultaneously here and somewhere else. It was as if he had access to a knowledge none of us possessed, remarked a fellow actor, as if he had seen beyond the veil and could no longer unsee what he witnessed. Have you ever experienced moments of such crystalline clarity that they seem to illuminate your entire existence? Moments when everyday illusions evaporate and you glimpse something more real behind them? For Caviezel, those moments became more frequent. During one particularly intense scene, he suddenly stopped acting. The crew was baffled when he simply stepped away from the cameras, walked toward a secluded corner of the set, and approached a man that no one had noticed before, a local extra. In a language that wasn't his own, Jim spoke to the man, who then broke down in tears. Later, it was discovered that Caviezel had mentioned extremely personal details about a family tragedy the man was enduring, information he could not possibly have known. "I can't explain it," Jim later confessed. "The words simply came to me, as if whispered right into my ear." Meanwhile, inexplicable phenomena continued to occur around the production. Local residents reported strange lights on the hills at night. Animals behaved erratically near the set. People described feeling watched when they were alone. An elderly monk from a nearby monastery visited the set uninvited. Upon meeting Caviezel, he fixed him with an intense gaze and said in Italian, "They know you're exposing them. They are trying to stop it. Stand strong." Before anyone could question him, the monk departed, and subsequent investigations revealed that no monastery in the region had any record of a religious figure matching his description. Would you believe the testimony of your own eyes if they showed you something that your mind insists is impossible? One particularly difficult night after filming, Jim retreated to his temporary lodging. Physically and emotionally drained, he fell asleep quickly, only to be awakened at 3:33 a.m., what scholars call the mirror hour, by an inexplicable sound. In the darkened room, he sensed a presence, not a visible figure, but a density in the air, a feeling of weight and intent, and then a voice, not audible to the ears, but clear in his mind. "Do you think you can reveal the truth without consequences?" Jim recalled feeling a primordial, visceral fear, unlike anything he had experienced before. Not the fear of physical pain or death, but something deeper, the terror of the unknown, of the incomprehensible. Summoning all his courage and faith, Jim spoke aloud. The truth must be revealed, no matter the cost. What followed was described by him as an invisible battle. Objects in the room began to vibrate. The temperature plunged so abruptly that his breath formed mist in the air. And within him, he felt as though something was trying to invade his mind, implanting doubts, fear, despair. For what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes, Jim resisted, not with physical strength, but with an unwavering spiritual determination. He recited prayers, mantras, and biblical passages that spontaneously surfaced in his memory. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything ceased. The room returned to normal. The presence vanished. The next morning, the crew found Caviezel transformed. There was a new resolve in his eyes, a steely determination. When asked about his exhausted appearance, he simply replied, "Now I understand what we are fighting against." Have you ever felt that you were involved in something greater than yourself? That your actions, seemingly simple and everyday, resonate in realms you cannot fully see or comprehend? The filming of The Passion of the Christ continued, now with renewed intensity. And as the production neared its final scenes, the inexplicable phenomena did not subside. They escalated, as if unseen forces realized they were running out of time to stop what was being created. What Jim Caviezel did not know was that the lightning incident had been only the beginning. The true trial was yet to come. In human history, there are moments when the veil between the visible and invisible becomes so thin that we can almost see through it. Moments when forces that usually operate in the shadows manifest in ways that cannot be ignored or rationalized. The final weeks of filming The Passion of the Christ became one such rare occasion. Can you imagine being at the epicenter of a spiritual conflict? Feeling energies colliding, invisible intentions manifesting in the material world? As production neared the final scenes of the resurrection, strange events intensified to the point that even the most skeptical crew members could no longer deny them. Re-examinations of the footage revealed inexplicable visual anomalies. Dark shapes lurking at the edges of frames, distortions in the image when certain passages were spoken, reflections of light that did not match any source on set. For Jim Caviezel, the experience became increasingly personal. In one particularly disturbing incident, He woke one morning to find that during the night, someone, or something, had entered his room and rearranged his personal belongings into specific patterns. A cross formed with his possessions, pages of his script left open to precise passages, a perfect circle drawn on the bathroom mirror, not with paint, but as if the condensation had been selectively wiped away. Would you dismiss that as a prank by a crew member? Or would you begin to suspect that something more was at work than meets the eye? I constantly felt watched. Jim confessed to a close friend, not just by human eyes, but by something else. Something that wanted me to give up, to be afraid, to run. One day, during the filming of one of the most powerful scenes, when the risen Christ emerges from the tomb, a series of inexplicable events unfolded in rapid succession. 3 cameras failed simultaneously. A local tremor shook the set, though no seismic activity was recorded by regional instruments. And most strikingly, the fake wounds on Caviezel's hands, created with makeup, began to bleed. The makeup artist who witnessed the phenomenon was left in shock. I applied that makeup myself. There was nothing in it that could have caused this. It was real blood coming from wounds that hadn't existed before. Filming was halted. Doctors examined Caviezel and were baffled to find small lesions on the palms of his hands that hadn't been there hours before. Lesions that, according to them, appeared to have formed from the inside out, as if something had pierced his skin from within. Would you believe the testimony of qualified medical professionals when they described something scientifically impossible? That night, Jim isolated himself in his room. The experience had surpassed the limits of what he considered possible, what he was prepared to face. For the first time since filming began, he seriously considered abandoning the project. Then he received an unexpected visit. An elderly man, identifying himself only as a former keeper of local stories, somehow managed to bypass the set security and knock on his door. "You are not the first to face this," the old man said in surprisingly clear English for a local. "Whenever someone gets too close to the truth, they try to stop it." "Them?" Jim asked, feeling that same weight in the air he had experienced before. "The forces that thrive in darkness," the man replied, "that feed on fear, doubt, and despair. They do not want the story of hope and redemption to be told." The old man then shared something astonishing, details about the lightning incident that no one else present could have known, precise descriptions of the phenomena Jim had been experiencing in particular, knowledge that seemed impossible for a stranger to possess. "How do you know all that?" asked Caviezel, a shiver running down his spine. The man smiled gently. "Let's just say I have been watching for a long time, and I have come to tell you this. The lightning wasn't an attack. It was protection." "Protection? I nearly died." "No, my son. Without that surge of energy, what was trying to reach you would have succeeded. The lightning was like a vaccine, a small dose of the power that sought to consume you, administered in a way that your body and spirit could process and develop resistance." Can you imagine having your entire understanding of reality turned upside down in an instant? Discovering that what seemed like a disaster was, in fact, a protective intervention? Before leaving, the old man handed Jim a small object, an ancient stone engraved with symbols that later archaeologists would identify as Aramaic, the language spoken by Jesus. "Finish what you started," the old man said, "not for yourself, but for those who will see and be transformed." The next morning, when Jim inquired about the nocturnal visitor, no one in security recalled seeing any elderly person coming or going from the premises. The security cameras showed no trace of a visitor at his door, yet the stone remained there, solid and inexplicable in his hand. With a new understanding and renewed determination, Jim Caviezel returned to the set. Filming continued, and although strange phenomena persisted, he now faced them not with fear, but with the serene certainty of someone who understood his role in something far greater than a mere movie. What no one could have foreseen was that the true test was still to come. Not during the filming, but after its completion, when the movie was finally ready to be unveiled to the world. The final day of shooting arrived like the culmination of a spiritual marathon. The crew, exhausted yet triumphant, gathered for the final scenes, the resurrection, the moment when darkness gives way to light, when despair is transformed into hope. Can you feel the weight of that moment? the culmination not only of months of intense work, but of a journey that had pushed everyone's understanding of reality to its limits. The sky above the set dawned in a spectacle of impossible colors, shades of amber, violet, and gold that several crew members later described as unnatural and almost supernatural. Photographers tried to capture the phenomenon, only to discover that their cameras inexplicably failed when aimed at the sky. For Jim Caviezel, there was crystal clear clarity. Weeks of inexplicable phenomena, the lightning incident, the dreams and visions, the physical manifestations, all converged into that final moment. When he entered the set for the last scene, something extraordinary happened. Witnesses described a shift in the atmosphere, not metaphorically, but literally. The air pressure seemed to change. Sounds became sharper. Colors grew more vivid, as if reality itself had been amplified, intensified. It was as if we were filming in 2 dimensions at once, remarked a cinematographer. The physical world and something more. During the filming of the resurrection scene, when Jim Caviezel emerged as the risen Christ, several crew members independently reported seeing a light emanating from him. Not a special effect, not a lighting trick, but a radiance that appeared to come from within. The makeup artist who had witnessed the inexplicable bleeding of the fake wounds days earlier watched, aghast, as the small lesions on Jim's hands, which had been concealed with makeup for the scene, healed completely before her eyes during filming. Would you believe it if you saw something like that happen? Or would you seek alternative explanations, rationalizations that preserve your orderly view of the world? Mel Gibson, watching from the monitors, realized that something transcendent was occurring. "Keep filming. Don't stop," he ordered, as technical teams reported impossible readings on their devices, fluctuations in energy, magnetic anomalies, audio distortions that, when later analyzed, contained patterns linguists identified as fragments of ancient Aramaic. When the final scene concluded, a profound silence descended on the set. Not the usual quiet after a successful day of filming, but a reverent, heavy silence, as if following a deep revelation. "That's it," Gibson finally said. "We're done." But for Jim Caviezel, the end of filming did not mark the end of the experience. In the months that followed, while the movie was edited and prepared for release, he began to experience what he could only describe as echoes of what he had lived through. Strangers approached him on the streets, recounting dreams in which they had seen him. Ailing people asked for his touch, and some later reported inexplicable recoveries. In one particularly notable case, a woman who had been blind for years claimed to have partially regained her sight after a casual encounter with him. Doctors were puzzled, but confirmed the improvement in her condition, unable to offer any scientific explanation. As the film's release date approached, the strange manifestations were no longer limited to Jim or the production team. Unexplainable phenomena began occurring in connection with the movie's promotional materials. Posters were seen crying during public displays. Trailers, when shown in certain theaters, caused temporary electrical malfunctions. Journalists who attended preview screenings described sensory experiences that went beyond mere cinematic appreciation. And then, something even more extraordinary began to unfold. People who hadn't even seen the movie, merely glimpsing its trailers or hearing about it, reported vivid, transformative dreams. Some described precise details of scenes that had not yet been publicly revealed. It was as if the spiritual experience that had permeated the production was extending beyond the bounds of celluloid, affecting the consciousness of those who had never come into direct contact with the film. Have you ever felt that something seemingly distant, a book, a song, a movie, has touched your soul in ways that transcend ordinary sensory experience? On the eve of the worldwide premiere, Jim Caviezel withdrew for a period of reflection. The experiences of the past months had fundamentally transformed his understanding of reality, spirituality, and purpose. In isolation, he received an unsigned letter. Inside, there was only a single sheet of paper bearing a simple message. The lightning wasn't the end. It was the beginning. When The Passion of the Christ finally premiered, its impact far exceeded expectations. Beyond the anticipated controversies, theological debates, and cultural discussions, reports emerged of inexplicable experiences in movie theaters. People who had never shown any spiritual inclinations described profound moments of transcendence. Individuals from various religious traditions and even staunch atheists, recounted moments of clarity and connection during the screening that defied their previous worldviews. In an interview after the release, when questioned about the lightning incident and rumors of inexplicable events during filming, Jim Caviezel responded with a calm that surprised the interviewer. "There are things that happened I may never fully explain, and perhaps they don't need to be explained. Maybe some experiences aren't meant to be analyzed, but to be lived." Transformative. Years passed, and while Jim continued his career in Hollywood, something in him had changed permanently. Those close to him noticed a different quality in his presence, a depth, an awareness, a connection with something beyond the visible. And what of the stone with Aramaic inscriptions given to him by the mysterious old man? Jim still keeps it to this day. Scholars who have had the rare opportunity to examine it remain perplexed by its authenticity and age, estimated to be about 2,000 years old. In an increasingly skeptical world, quick to dismiss the inexplicable as illusion or coincidence, Jim Caviezel's experience stands as a testament that perhaps, just perhaps, there are dimensions of reality we have yet to fully comprehend. And perhaps the lightning bolt that struck him on that distant day in Matera wasn't an attempt to stop him, but a wake-up call, a summons, an initiation. Are you ready to consider that there is more in the heavens and on earth than our philosophies imagine? That perhaps the invisible forces shaping our world are not mere metaphors, but realities that occasionally manifest in ways that challenge our limited understanding? For if there is one truth that the extraordinary journey of Jim Caviezel teaches us, it is this: when we commit ourselves to serving something greater than ourselves, when we become channels for eternal truths, both light and darkness respond. And sometimes that response comes in the form of a lightning bolt descending from the sky, marking not an end, but a beginning, not destruction, but transformation, a transcendence,